Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Mushroom Revival podcast. So strap in, tune in, shroom in for another episode.
And today we are welcoming the lovely singer and songwriter and performer Johanna Warren, tuning in all the way from Wales. And we are so excited to welcome her on the show to speak about how mushrooms influenced her artistic world and mental health, and I'm sure many other avenues in your life. Welcome, Johanna. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
So right before the show, you made a comment on the fungal abundance in Wales. What's it like? And what about this time of year? We are currently recording in January. What kind of fungi friends are you finding out there?
Yeah, not a lot happening in January. A lot of rotten, past their prime friends. But a couple months ago, it was Liberty Cap season, and the fields right outside my house were just popping with so many little fairy friends. But it's kind of a cruel irony. Well, it's actually really interesting. Something that I would love to talk with y'all about is this experience that I've been having since I've been here, which is my teenage self is like, dude, what are you doing? Because there's so many Liberty Caps growing all around me, but I haven't felt called to hang out with them much. Like, we've tried, I've like microdosed a few times, and it always makes me really sad. And I'm like, what happened? Because it's just like at different points in my process, it's been so vital. Like, just microdosing has been an essential part of my mental health journey. And I'm wondering, like, if I've just kind of ticked that box, gotten that lesson, those lessons, or something that's kind of been recently emerging in my mind is it place specific? Because something that I've been learning through spending this year rooted in this place is this land used to be ancient growth forest that was clear cut, and now it's all sheep pastures, basically a monocrop of sheep. So it looks, on first glance, it looks so idyllic and ridiculously gorgeous. But the more time I've spent here and just listening and witnessing, I'm like, oh my God, there's really not that much biodiversity here. There's really just one species that's being favored by human agriculture. So I'm feeling this heavy sadness of the land. And I'm like, is that what I'm picking up on with the fungus? You know, like, when every time that I've taken even just like a couple tiny caps, I've felt this really heavy grief come up. And I'm like, at first I thought maybe that was just my personal stuff that I needed to be processing. But now I'm thinking maybe it's the place. So I'm wondering if y'all have ever had those kinds of experiences.
Yeah, it's interesting how profound set and setting are, and differentiating between, is it me or is it just a weird environment, and what is the medicine trying to portray, and what is the lesson here? That sounds, if that's your gut instinct, I would go with that. And it's interesting because a lot of psilocybin species erupt in very disturbed places, in public, new construction sites, or some species out in the middle of nowhere in like really lush areas.
Some in the Burger King parking lot.
Some in the Burger King. And it's like, I think that's a little goody for humans to stumble upon, if we have that perspective of like, this is the universe's way of a plan B, so to speak. We have other people who have other trains of thought, who are just, psilocybin just for insects is just a chance that we stumbled upon them, and we're just making up these grandiose stories of what, putting meaning on something that doesn't really have any meaning. But
often with other herbs too, like, you'll see the really detoxifying herbs will grow in really polluted soil, and it's like, because that's why they feel called to grow in that kind of terrain. So I wonder with psilocybin too, if there's like a like an attempt to bring higher levels of consciousness to places that need it.
I've heard the same with poison ivy. Is that, you know, when there's a lot of construction or human traffic or things like that, poison ivy seems to pop up. I don't know how true that is, just word of mouth, but it created a beautiful narrative of the same kind of thought process of, yeah, nature is very intelligent, and there are these defense mechanisms that pop up. The answers to a lot of world's problems are just in our front yard.
Yeah. Yeah, that, and thank you. That does kind of just like contextualize and affirm my budding instinct about what the Liberty Caps around here have to say, which is like, feel your grief, feel the grief of this land and what's happened here. Poison ivy, I just had a thought about that the other day because I'm over in the UK and there's a ton of English ivy, but not really any poison ivy. So I was just so curious about that. And if anyone out there listening has info about this, I would love to hear from you, because the thought that came up was like, you know, English ivy was brought to the Americas as a kind of colonial plant. And I'm curious, there's some poetry there, like if poison ivy didn't already exist. I don't know. This is what I need to learn. Like, did poison ivy already exist in North America, or was it some kind of mutation from the English ivy that was brought over?
I'm just curious, how did you get into plants? You have medicine tour, is that right? Where you were connecting a lot of herbalists, and it seems like this is so entrenched in your life, but you're a musician. And I'm curious, like, how did these two worlds collide, and which one came first?
Music first, for sure. But both came, I think, as an attempt to heal myself, because I was just kind of blessed and cursed with a lot of weird illnesses and conditions that Western allopathic medicine just didn't really have many useful solutions for. Like, I was just medicated and mismedicated from a really young age and put on a lot of prescriptions that caused side effects, for which more prescriptions were given. And it just got to a point before I was 20 where I was just on like 12 different pharmaceuticals and in a really bad way. And it just hit a breaking point, and I started going off those things and seeking alternatives, and luckily just started hearing these whispers about another way, and started working on a farm in my senior year of high school. And that was really transformative. Like, one of the things I had been dealing with was anorexia. I just like didn't want to eat. And I think part of it was like the conditioning of fashion magazines and TV, but I think there was also some kind of energetic spiritual thing going on where just the food that I was being faced with did not register as nutrition, because it wasn't. Like, I just didn't want to put it in my body. And then it was just working on this organic farm for the first time that I remember walking home with these bunches of dirty turnips, and I'd spent all day harvesting them, and I was covered in sweat and shit, and just was like, yes, the bounty, and like walked into the little hut where I was staying and roasted them up and gorged myself on these turnips, and it felt so good. So that's kind of been my journey in a nutshell, like coming out of the trenches of just feeling so lost and so sick and so sad, and then finding magic and joy in the plant world.
I think it's similar to what we were talking about with Liberty Caps. I think it's, you know, it's a beautiful initiation process that I wish more people had the opportunity to take. And I went through a similar journey of, you know, having depression and Lyme disease and things. And it wasn't like, I don't think of it much as a choice other than life and death. You know, it was like, do you want to live or do you want to die? And I was like, well, I'd rather live this time. And the only choice really was to find yoga, to find all these different modalities, these tools in the tool belt to keep walking down that medicine path. And it's Burger King or the Liberty Cap, you know? It's this fork in the road that I think as a whole society we're about to embark on. And some people are a little ahead. They already picked their fork in the road, and you know, some people haven't gotten there yet. But I think as a whole globe, we're reaching that fork in the road of, you know, we don't have much time left. There's wildfires. There's all these problems in the world, and we got to make a decision of what path to go down.
Yeah. I wonder about that. Like, I've been thinking a lot about this because obviously it feels so apocalyptic right now, but I'm like, has it always been that way? Like, there's always been some crazy shit going down on planet Earth. And before we had the internet and were aware of the global predicament, we would have only known what was going on in our little medieval village. And there were massacres, there were plagues, there was all kinds of crazy things happening all the time. And people have always thought it was the end times. So I'm starting to wonder, has there always been that fork in the road? And how, you know, or is it just a karmic thing of like, when do you confront it, in what lifetimes, how many times in this cyclical spiral? Because I feel like there's always been these forces of initiation and counter initiation doing this dance and trying to pull us in.
Yeah, and is time, you know, linear, or is it always now? And if it's always now, then it's, you know, it's always been apocalyptic. It's always been the end times, and it's always here and now. Do you choose to be here now? And do you choose to choose the light over the darkness or whatever? Or, you know, you're Zen and it doesn't matter, and it's both God and it's all beautiful. But now it's only because we have access to information that it's so crazy now. Have you read this story, The Egg? This is a little tangent, but it's a beautiful story of basically describes this guy dying, and he wakes up in heaven or the afterlife or whatever, and he talks to God, and basically God was like, well, you're about to reincarnate in 12,000 AD into, you know, this Chinese 12-year-old girl body. And he's like, wait, what do you mean? I'm going back in time? He's like, well, time doesn't really exist like you think. And he's like, well, if I go back in time, wouldn't there be a chance that I would bump into my old self? And he's like, well, it's kind of all you. And you have to basically incarnate in every single life forever, throughout all time, and then you become me.
Dang.
And then it's like, and then, you know, once you're me, then you have to guide yourself through all these different lives, and it's just like, it's all one, it's all an egg, it's all happening at the same time. And it's a beautiful, beautiful story. I highly recommend all of our listeners, regardless of religious view or, you know, philosophical view on the universe. It's a beautiful story, and it's an interesting, you know, perspective on the world that it's a fun little mental exercise of what if, you know.
It's a logical path to God, because we constantly associate the adjective omniscient. What better way to be omniscient than have the perspective of each and every single life that ever lived? Maybe mushrooms help you dip your toes into the consciousnesses before and after this one.
Yeah, and it's almost like Midnight Gospel. You know, we're on a podcast right now where we're consciousness, being conscious of consciousness itself, and interviewing all the galactic beings out there. And, you know, you wrote a song for the Midnight Gospel, the show, and I'm just curious, how did that go down? Who reached out to who?
Yeah.
Give me all the juicy details.
Well, I didn't write it. I was lucky enough to sing it, but that was a composition by Duncan and Joe Wong. Yeah, well, it's a crazy story, really. Like, I was listening to Duncan's podcast for a long time, and he was really like a light in the darkness as I was traveling alone for many years, and didn't really feel like I had the best community, because I was just, I mean, I did, and it was so transient. Like, I would just be in a different city every night, so I got really good at being friends with whoever was right in front of me, but there was no consistency. And then I would be, you know, surrounded by people and then completely alone, and then surrounded by people again and then completely alone again. It was very disorienting. But Duncan was this kind of constant presence, and it just felt like a real friend in that time. And I did not know him, had no connection to him, didn't know anyone who knew him. But probably about 3 years ago, I wrote like a manifestation list of like cool things that will have happened to me in 3 years. And I think probably number 1 or number 2 was like, Duncan Trussell and I are good friends. Like, underline, underline, underline. And then nothing happened. Like, I put out a record and had a professional publicist working, and she was like, what media outlets do you want me to hit up with this? And I was like, the DTFH. And she was like, well, it's basically impossible, but I'll try. And nothing happened. And then the next year, I got really sick. It's kind of like a fairy tale, because I'd been touring on that plant medicine tour, actually, which we can talk about. I was really pushing myself beyond on this healing mission, which is so beautifully ironic. But I got very sick, and my body just forced me to stop. I was just passing out in public, and no amount of sleep felt like it was enough to recharge my batteries even a little bit. And I got diagnosed with Epstein-Barr virus, and my doctor was just like, there's nothing you can really do for this except rest and get sunshine. So I have this amazing auntie who lives in St. Petersburg, Florida, where I was born. So I just like dropped everything I was doing and went to stay with her for 3 months, and was just completely surrendered for the first time in my life to healing and prioritizing that above all else, and putting aside my ambitions and careerist goals. You know, it's just like, my body is suffering, and unless I get that sorted out, I'm not going to be able to do any of the other things that I want to do. If my body is kicking and screaming the whole way, it's not going to be fun anyway, if possible. So I went on this healing vacation, which was actually like the hardest thing I've ever done in a way. But the first week I was there, I met this very eccentric, interesting, fascinating, beautiful person who came up to me and was like, you're Johanna Warren, right? And I was like, yeah. And he was like, I do a podcast. You should come be on it. And I looked down and saw on his legs, he had one calf fully inked with a Ram Dass face tat, and the other one with Duncan Trussell. And I was like, nice tattoos. And he was like, oh yeah, Duncan's been on my show a couple times. Like, I can call him and make it a 3-way conversation. I was like, what? Oh my God. So that happened. And then, oh, I forgot to say, I had a dream the night before I met this fellow. I had a dream that I was on the DTFH, and like Britney Spears was there, like abducting us all through a space vacuum, and farm animals were swirling around. And
so
then,
how many Liberty Caps were ingested before?
just high on life, I guess. But yeah, so that it was kind of this weird prophetic dream thing. And then I met this guy, and then suddenly I was in contact with this person. And it was just, to me, like the fairy tale lesson was only in surrendering and giving up does the thing that you were seeking come to you. Because Duncan, like, he represented something to me. You know, it wasn't just about like, I want to be this person's friend. It was like, there's someone else in the universe who sees things the way that I do and wants to help people and is devoting their life to putting something out there that's creative and bridging a gap for all these people coming from all kinds of different walks of life, and just stimulating enlightening conversation, you know? So I was just like, there's someone out there, and I want to know that person. And like, and also this kind of like desire for validation or like, you know, just to be seen by that person. So yeah, it was kind of this momentous occasion for me on my journey of like letting go of that kind of need as well, you know, just like remembering that like what we were just talking about, we're all God, and like there's no, you know, you might feel like this person is in a whole other solar system so far away from you, but then in a matter of days through certain serendipitous events you're suddenly sitting right across from them and they're like bowing to you, you know, and it's like we think we're so different and so separate, but we're not even close. We're like actually literally the same thing.
Did you have that three-way podcast or?
We did. And then I told Duncan that I'd had that dream about Britney Spears and stuff, and he was like, "Oh, no way, that's actually how I select guests for my podcast these days."
Oh, that's so funny.
So then I was going back to LA after I got my body healed, and that's where he was. So yeah, then we did the podcast, and he invited me to be on that show, which was very fun.
Yeah, we listened to, and I've listened to probably a couple dozen Duncan Trussell throughout years, and I do love that the conversations feel like almost like company. You're just in the room with these two people, and it's very beautifully natural and organic, and Duncan's voice is just unforgettable. He made the perfect Clancy.
Yeah, I think he has a real gift of like bringing out the best in people. And sometimes I love just like listening to the way that he maneuvers through certain conversations, because sometimes you can kind of even tell that maybe he doesn't agree or like even thinks somebody's a little full of shit, but he's just kind of really like he finds a way of framing it in such a way that it's like complimentary, or it's like being a good dance partner or something, just like making the other person look good and always somehow guiding conversation into a positive place that I think most people can get something really constructive from.
One thing I picked up from on that show was that you were also dealing with diabetes type 1, and man, that plus the Epstein-Barr virus, I mean, how are you doing today, and how are you kind of maintaining homeostasis and health?
Not being on the road is helping a lot. It was hard to even gauge like where baseline was, because that was such a crazy way to live. So this year has been revelatory, just like waking up in the same place and cooking and eating food at regular intervals. It's kind of a new thing for me, and I'm really into it. But yeah, definitely the struggle is ongoing, but I've kind of just tried to allow my body space to do whatever it needs to do and not judge it and not be angry at it and not feel like it's sabotaging me or holding me back. It's like this moment happened with the Epstein-Barr thing when I was in Florida that time, where I had been fighting it and just so angry that it was happening, and feeling like there was this big scary monster that was just like lurking around every corner and would come out like every time that I would just feel overcome by this exhaustion. I felt like it was this demonic entity that was just ruining my day. But then I had this vision at a certain point where that big monster came out, and then it just transformed into this little fuzzy kitten and crawled up and curled up in my lap. And this feeling of like this thing is going to be with you for the rest of your life turned into a blessing rather than like a threat. You know, like it's gonna be with you for the rest of your life, to it's gonna be with me for the rest of my life. Because the thing is, like, when I feel that exhaustion creep in now, it's like a signal that I'm pushing too hard, and just need to like soften and make my approach more gentle, and then or just take a minute and breathe differently, or straighten up my posture, or move. And then it's like, thank you, little kitten guru. I'm so glad you're going to be with me for the rest of my life, because this is so much nicer.
Yeah, I had the same kind of relationship with Lyme, and the same thing of feeling like it was this demonic thing, and I would be so relieved when symptoms weren't flaring up, and I was like, finally I can live my life again. And then just, it was a ticking time bomb, and then boom, my leg would give out and I would be limping or whatever it was. And someone told me that they got a download that it was like an alien initiation basically, and that it was a test, and you could either view it like you just said of an ally, and kind of like a checks and balances for your life. And I still am a person of extremes. Like, if I get into something, I will get into it to the end of time, you know, and until I'm bloodshot eyes, and just, you know, I turn it up to 11 to anything I do, and then I burn out. And that was a pattern, especially during Lyme, which was like, when I burnt out, I would have days of just couldn't do anything, you know, and then I would build up my energy. I would make all these broths and teas and, you know, all this stuff. And then I would be like, God, got my energy back. Gotta burn it. You know, I gotta use it. And then I would burn out. And that was huge of like, okay, this is a pattern. Why don't we stay here, you know, instead of going all the way up and down? And that was such a blessing, because, you know, being burnt out sucks. And going back to like what you're saying, going on the road, I can't even imagine. I'm not a road warrior whatsoever. And I've done like semi cross country road trips, and at the end of it, I'm like, I don't want to look at a car for a really long time. And you start out the trip so excited, so, you know, so much energy, and then by the end of it, you're like, dude, I hate that. Like, I gotta get out of this car, and I am just wiped out. You know, and seeing people after long road trips, just like someone squeezed out the life juice out of them. It's really funny. But some people can. Some people live in their vans, and they're like glowing, and all they do is just drive for 8 hours a day. But they stop at national parks, and they're just like glowing, and they love that life. It's a certain type of person.
We're adaptable creatures. Yeah, I think we can learn to thrive in pretty extreme conditions. And there were definitely times when I felt like so close to God living that way. It was definitely a life of extremes. But it was almost like the worse the conditions were in some instances, if I really accepted that and put my mind to it, it was like the pressure that turns coal into a diamond or something. And it really brought out the best practices in me. And I was like, yeah, maybe sleeping 2 hours a night, but then making sure I woke up before we would leave to do an hour of yoga and meditation. And then I was like, this is better than 8 hours. But then, yeah, other times when it was just a grind. So, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I don't miss it, but I know it's also addictive, because then once you do it for a certain amount of time, you just forget how to function normally in society. Like, when you get home from a 6-month tour, you're like, who am I? Like, without that fix of adrenaline and praise every night, and people coming up to you and having the same repetitive conversation of like, great set, where are you going next, where are you coming from, will you sign this t-shirt? That's your life for the most part. And then when you have to actually just wake up and do your laundry and pay your bills and cook dinner,
See the same scenery.
Yeah, it feels very jarring. So yeah, I feel like I've been like a major addict, like tour addict, and I've been getting clean this year, and it's good.
And this was the plant medicine tour.
This was like the last decade of my life, just being on the road more often than not. The plant medicine tour was 3 months in 2017, I think, 2018. And yeah, just solo driving myself around the whole country. It was something like 75 shows or something in 3 months. And all just a big circle around the whole US.
Can you talk about, I read just a little bit of how you brought all these local herbalists in each show, and how did you coordinate that, and what was going down? What was the whole purpose of the show?
I was gearing up to go out on the road for a long time and feeling really conflicted about that, like just feeling like I needed some kind of guidance from the universe about whether I was on the right path, because, burning fossil fuels, selling plastics, I was like, am I deluding myself that this is worthwhile? Like, is there something else, some better way that I could be spending my time? But I was living in Oregon at the time, and I went out into the forest and was just meditating and asking these questions, and it was like I could literally hear the plants just start kind of thrumming and humming and calling on me. They were like, hey, you put yourself on stage every night with a microphone, and you have a human voice, and you're talking to rooms full of humans, and we've got a lot of shit to say, and we can't do that. So we nominate you to be our spokesperson, and here's a mission should you choose to accept it. And it was just like the whole kind of vision came through in that moment, and I booked it all in like a month. Like, I booked a 3-month tour myself, but I feel like the plants really did it. Like, I worked really hard, and it was a full-time job that month, just booking the show and coordinating with all the plant people, but it feels superhuman. Like, that feat, in retrospect, I'm like, like, if you told me to do that now, I'd be like, fuck off. Like, you're crazy. That sounds way too hard. But it happened, like, so gracefully, and it was really magical. It was, like, every single place, herbalists and farmers and advocates came out and had tables where they were selling their beautiful products, and I gave them all the opportunity to come up and talk on the mic for a little bit if they wanted to, about what they're doing, how people could get involved, and their journeys with plants and herbal medicine. So it was just really amazing, and really, like, the only way that I think I would want to tour again in the future, if I ever do, is just doing something like that, like making it more than just 30 to 60 minutes of entertainment, like really harnessing that collective power of a room full of human bodies, and like, what are we really here for? What do we want to get from this? What can we do with this energy? How can we bring it out into the world? And just like connecting dots that already exist in communities, but maybe people who don't know each other, who should be talking but haven't yet, just making people aware of each other's existence. I think that's one of the best things that a gathering like that can do. So yeah, and really it helped me just kind of remember the true hierarchy of importance, as far as I can perceive it, of like me as this human mouthpiece for bigger forces that are so much more compelling and smart and worthwhile than I feel like anything that I can come up with by myself, like whatever even that means. It was just like, let me just use what little privilege I have by being up here on stage to just kind of shine a mirror back up to the light from above and like amplify that, rather than being like, me centric, like this is, you know, like just the end all be all of this experience is just to like congratulate me on my accomplishments, you know. It was like, let's talk about healing, let's talk about plants, let's talk about you, let's talk about us. Let's go home with some tinctures.
That is so special. I wish that more humans with microphones, with a lot of people listening to them, would do a similar thing.
Me too.
And take advantage of your conduit vessel.
Yeah, just do something interesting, you know, like just or worthwhile. Yeah, I started going to shows and feeling this way increasingly in the last couple of years before COVID and everything, just feeling so frustrated by watching people just go through the rehearsed routine and like not really even feeling it themselves, just kind of like phoning it in. And it's just like, dude, just fucking just drop the mic, like go off script, do something to remind yourself and us that you're alive and so are we, you know, like just stir the pot. Like you don't have to be a human jukebox, you know.
And where did mushrooms show up for you on your personal journey?
I was 18 the first time that I encountered them. And I was, yeah, it was definitely this like gateway to the rest of my life. 'Cause I feel like I was all of high school, I was just a zombie, just so that's not entirely true. I was a heavily medicated, very depressed and confused, but very creative and curious and angry person. You know, I was just like looking around, seeing the way the world was. I was just so distraught about all of the suffering and just so overwhelmed by trying to find a place in it and trying to feel like I could be at all useful, and just I was flailing and so sad and so out of touch with magic and fun, which I think, you know, as a small child I was just very into being outside and playing with plants and being a fairy and playing with magic in a way that felt true to me. But then when that left, when that was kind of conditioned out of me, that's when things all got really heavy and sad. So that first mushroom trip was like this remembrance and like a homecoming to my own mind and body, you know, just like, oh my God, I remember this. I remember what it felt like to just be able to lie outside in a field and have endless entertainment, you know, just to be able to look at the grass and the bugs and for that to be enough, you know. So radically freeing and empowering, you know.
What introduced you to mushrooms the first time? Was it a friend, or did you seek it out? Was it just
it was my friend
happenstance?
Sean. Yeah, thanks, Sean. Yeah. Good influence.
And how did they continue to serve you? You mentioned you were very into microdosing. I'm not sure if you immediately adopted that after that experience.
I was trying to remember this. Like, I don't remember having any significant trips in college. I think maybe because I was just like put back on a ton of really intense psych meds and didn't want to fuck with it. But then after that, like after I had weaned myself off of all of those things and was really like seeking holistic ways of stabilizing my mental health, psychedelics, MDMA played a big role in it. Like the first time that I did MDMA, I was just like, holy shit, I understand how to love people for the first time in my life, you know? Like I had just like never been comfortable socializing with people. I just didn't understand why you would want to like go to a party and talk to people. I was just like, I would rather be at home painting. But then the first time that I took MDMA, I just like, of course, understood it in such an intense way, just like roving the college campus and just like finding this like random person from my philosophy class who I'd never talked to and just like going up to him and being like, "You're fascinating. Tell me everything about you. I just want to like be inside you." So yeah, that like mushrooms came back. I'm trying to remember if I did any mushrooms from like age 18 to 24. I don't know if I did. But then when I was starting to tour, microdosing became vital, like just to get through the slog of that lifestyle, just a little bit, a couple times a week, just to keep the sparkle alive. Yeah, I don't know how I would have gotten through without them. Mm-hmm. And that was what finally kicked my chronic depression out the door, was just like that period of regular microdosing. For the first time, I just felt like I'm not depressed. And it's been years, you know, that was probably when I was like 25. So 7 years ago. And that, you know, after like a long young life of like major depression, just not a thing anymore.
Did you feel like it was chipping away gradually, or you just one day woke up and realized that the depression wasn't there anymore?
I think it was after that. It was like a 6-month period of microdosing regularly, and I don't think I felt depressed during that time, and then it just kind of never came back.
And do you think that had an influence on your music? Like, do you feel like there were the depressed genre of your music, or that era of your life, and the tones that came out were, you know, kind of a reflection of your inner emotional state, and then afterwards it was just kind of a different feeling of music?
I feel like that I've kind of always historically written from a sad place, like 90% of the time, but I'm excited to change that now. Like, I feel like I want to reapproach songwriting from a more joyful place and see what's possible there, because yeah, I think it's just like an ego death, because I've been so associated with like the Elliott Smith kind of approach. That's sort of what I came up on and what I set out to do, and I feel like I've hung out there for a while, and like I know that I don't want to reinvoke personal pain for the sake of making art anymore, which I think is a trap that is so easy to fall into, like this belief that you have to be sad to make meaningful work. I just don't believe that anymore, and I want to make the rest of my life an act of resistance against that story. Yeah, but I don't really know what it's going to look like. That it feels scary and completely new and different to try to think about writing music from like anywhere other than sadness. But that said, there's no shortage of grief, like collective grief and lived historical grief. Like, I feel like there's plenty to draw from without creating more of it.
One of the best lessons that I've gotten from mushrooms is that sadness and grief is okay. And I think that was, you know, we started the show, if you're like, you know, I felt sad. Is that normal, or is that okay? Or, you know, and trying to diagnose of what's going on. And, you know, it's very Zen I mean, it's like, it is what it is, and it's all part of the universe. And that is just what is happening. And we love to label things good and bad, you know, and I'm supposed to be this way, and therefore I have to put a smile on and this and that, or I'm an artist and I have to be sad, you know, like you said, or, you know, I am a lawyer, therefore I have to be serious, or I'm this, therefore I have to be this, and wearing these costumes. I think mushrooms do a good job of just tearing that down and revealing the truth of like, what actually are you feeling? And if it's not healthy, it can help rewrite some of those scripts. It's one of my mentors said it's not bad to eat ice cream, and it's only the mental state that you're in which carries the toxicity. And so if you have this mental state going into eating a whole tub of ice cream, like, I love myself and this is amazing and I love the universe, take a freaking canoe paddle and eat that ice cream. You know, if you're eating kale and you say like, I hate myself, that's not healthy. And it's always this external view of what health is. But I think, you know, it's, and going back to like your association to illness, it's like viewing it as this big bad, resisting it, you know, you're resisting illness is when it's really toxic. But if you're just like, hello, like, welcome to my life, and let's find a symbiosis, and let's mesh and find the medicine in this here and nowness, that's where it's juicy. And that's, you know, always got to find those golden nuggets in every situation.
Yeah, so true. Yeah, it's the stories that you tell around everything that hold all the meaning, and nothing is inherently bad or good. Yeah, I feel like with the diabetes that I've got going on, there's one very scientific means of measuring one aspect of that, which is glycemic index of foods and how it affects my blood sugar. And I've definitely gotten a similar sort of magical teaching about food that way. Like, I was working on my friend Jeff's farm a few years ago, and we were picking figs one day, and figs are pretty sweet. And as I was just devotionally, joyfully picking these ripe figs, I just couldn't help myself from eating them, you know. And we were working for a couple hours, and I probably ate like 30 figs, which has a ton of carbohydrates. But I checked my blood sugar and it was like on the low end of perfect. And then, so I was like, oh my God, I guess figs are like a superfood for me. Like I'm just like immune to the sugars in figs or something. So I went home and like bought a tub of figs from the local co-op, and it was like emailing and stressing out at my computer and like stress eating figs, and then checked my blood sugar and it was through the roof. So the download there was like, it's not the what, it's the how, dude. Like you were in this state of communion, you know, picking and eating as you went, versus like just mindlessly shoveling food into your face while stressing. And two very different results from the same basic chemical input.
Like your mental state has a profound effect on that. We see this with placebo all the time, and how powerful that is.
And with psilocybin, you know, that's set, you know, and we had a friend that recently had a interesting journey with psilocybin, to say the least, and you know, went into it not with the best set, and was going into it very paranoid, and very stressed out, and not in a great setting either. But his set at that moment going into it was very paranoid, and from the week up to it, just, you know, and took a lot, like 7-8 grams or something like that. And the journey was very paranoid, unbelievably paranoid, making up these crazy, wild, outlandish stories. And I've had a journey like that of going in paranoid, hoping that the medicine will give me some clarity on the situation, because I was whipping up all these crazy ideas, and the next 6 hours or whatever are unbelievably paranoid, and just your mind can whip up the craziest stories that and then when you come back down and you're like, what was I thinking? How could I like whip up these crazy stories? But that is the medicine. It's like, well, that is, let me amplify that for you, and you can actually feel it in your body. Does that feel good to be paranoid? No, it doesn't. And so like drop your story making and get out of your mind. Yeah, it's powerful. And I think they really shine a light on what's important and what you may be distracting yourself from. And it could be good, it could be bad, or or not. It's not good or bad. It just is. It shines a light on what is going through your mind at the moment, or in your environment, that maybe we do a great job of distracting ourselves from.
Yeah, that's a good way of looking at it. And I think, yeah, looking back, I think there's, with my relationship to the Liberty Caps that I'm living surrounded by, there's been this like weird, egoic attachment and a rejection of this reality where like, mushrooms make me sad. What? No, they don't. Like, they make me happy. I love them. And like, I think it's just this clinging to this old story, which was the perfect medicine at that time when I was so caught in sadness all the time. And the mushrooms were like, hey, remember, life is magical. Like, remember when you saw rainbows and sparkles all the time? Like, we'll help you bring that back. And now I actually feel like I've integrated that pretty well, and I generally live in a pretty like rainbow sparkly dimension. And I think their offering to me now has been like, hey, but remember, like, ow, we're hurting. Like, there's so much pain in this land, and like, we need you to like heed the call of action, just get involved. And if you care about this as much as you claim to, like, now is a really good time to show up and put your money where your mouth is.
They're good balancing acts. And if the definition of balance is not to sit in the fulcrum, but to go back and forth between the two opposing forces.
I really like what you said about having expectations of the journey, and clinging on to this idea of like, oh, this is going to be joyful. And it's the way it spins the lesson of, you can't be joyful because there's this sadness that you're distracting yourself from, and you're wanting happiness without looking at the darkness. You're wanting the plant without looking at the soil. And and then it's like, but I don't want to look at the soil. I want to look at the plant. And it's all connected, and it's funny. It's also, when you're talking about how before you went on the Duncan Trussell's show, that you wrote your visions of the future. And I've heard this from a lot of people, including myself, of having visions on plant medicine and expecting them to go exactly how you envision them. And sometimes it's a spin-off. So like, I've gotten super crystal clear, or so what I thought, visions. And, one of them was to work for somebody. And I was like, this is what I'm meant to do. This is my purpose. I'm going to move to this place and work for somebody. And it didn't work out. And I was like, but why did I have that crystal clear vision? This doesn't make any sense. And, a year later or something, I did this trip that was like semi-organized with this person. And so it was like partly working with them, and it didn't really work out. And I was like, I got the lesson, like, like that wasn't meant to be. So I kind of worked with them, but the lesson was, you're really not supposed to work with them. And it was confusing to me. It was like, but why'd you give me that crystal clear vision, And it's interesting how we cling to these ideas of what life or reality should be. And the way it's served is just a little different. And another thing is like fireworks or light shows in the psychedelic community, of people going into a journey wanting beautiful colors, or they want to see fairies, and they want to see rainbows, and they want to see this like beautiful psychedelic all positivity light show, and they want to be entertained, and they want to still keep intact their body and their ego, and they want their ego to be entertained by this like astral plane, you know. And yeah, I've had journeys of just like silence, you know, and the whole thing, I'm just like waiting for the light show, and I'm like, is this thing gonna kick in yet? And then you know, it all and it just works on my subconscious, and my conscious is like looking around like, where's the medicine, like where's it gonna be? And it's just in the background, like rewiring my subconscious. And here I am, my ego's searching around like where's when is the mushrooms gonna kick in? When am I gonna get entertained? When is my Netflix show gonna turn on, or whatever? And yeah, it works in mysterious ways, and it's really beautiful. And it's really going back to what you said. The medicine really happens when you let go, and the second you just totally let go is when flow happens, and this beautiful state of everything aligning together. It always also happens if you're looking for morels, or any mushrooms. If you stop looking for mushrooms, they just appear. It always happens with me. The second I just give up, I'm like, I'm done looking for specifically morels. The second I stop looking for it, I look down and there is one.
So beautiful.
And it's this cosmic joke, you know. We have blindfolds or horse blinders on when we're looking for something, and the second we just give up,
it's hard to give up sometimes, though, and surrender is definitely a key when it comes to these journeys, but sometimes that is so much harder than it sounds. Like you don't even know what you're holding on to, or how to let go of it, or even if you truly like are trying to, there's internal demons that just won't. And sometimes what it takes is just a ton of fear until you like give up, or not give up, but like you run out of your capacity to hold on. So it's like the mushrooms are either like, you can walk through this door, or we're going to start making this room smaller and smaller until you don't have another choice.
Wow.
And yeah.
Have you heard of Sananga Eye Drops?
No.
It's this like embodied in a plant medicine. Is the funniest. I mean, it's such a cosmic joke in an eye drop. It's like hilarious. It's this plant, and it's called Sananga, and it's used in the Amazonia, or Amazon rainforest, and it's used a lot by hunters. I believe it's Warani, and I could be wrong, but it's used by hunters. They drop it in the eye, and it kind of burns the outer layer of your eye, and it's used a lot by people who have cataracts, and used by hunters to kind of clear the vision, and it works on a physical and metaphysical level. But it burns like a motherfucker. It's like intense. You know, we have a friend in Hawaii, and he's actually really, I mean, beautiful human, really has his shit together. And he had the vision to become a police officer because he saw all this terrible police officers doing terrible things in the world. And he's like, I want to change that. And the only way, or the vision he got is, I'm going to be a good embodiment of what that is and change it from the inside. Rather than trying to fight from the outside, I'm going to be in the force and change the whole system from the inside. So that was his journey. And so part of his training was to get pepper sprayed. And he thought that was, to put it in perspective, he thought that was nothing compared to Sananga. And the whole thing with Sananga is it only burns when you resist. It's the weirdest thing. The second you fully surrender to it, it just like travels to your heart and you feel unbelievable amount of love and bliss and like you're blissed out. And then the second you clench your fist and you struggle with it, it burns like times 1,000. It's like you're squeezing ghost peppers in your eyes and it's nuts. And then the second you let go, it's like bliss. And you're just like, kind of like MD, you're just like, I love the universe and I'm at bliss mode. And it's the funniest like cosmic joke in the universe embodied in eye drops. And
wow, I love that.
I mean, he was just talking about how another part of the training was to be tasered. And everyone was like trying to fight it. And the more you fight it, the more it hurts. And the second you let go.
He was like giggling, right?
Yeah, he was like, it's kind of like, what do you call it? When you wake up, but your body's still asleep.
Oh, yeah, he described it like sleep paralysis.
Sleep paralysis. So he's like, yeah, my body was numb, but I was fine. And he knew that the second he fought it and tightened his muscles, then it would be painful. I had a similar experience with like Tantra Yoga, a sect of it where you hold poses for like 40 minutes, you know, like warrior pose for 40 minutes. And it's intense. Like the first, I don't know, 10 minutes are like, oh yeah, okay, this is fine. And then you get the 20-minute mark and you're like, holy shit, this is starting to really burn. And your legs start shaking uncontrollably. And every minute feels like an eternity after that. And, you know, people were screaming in the room. People were crying. And like, I was laughing so hard because I was like, this is it. Like, this is this is great. And like totally surrendered. And I was in unbelievable bliss and like just laughing and like felt so much love because I surrendered. And it's such a cosmic joke, really. It's like, you know, we cause our own suffering and, you know, don't suffer your own suffering, you know, and if you completely let go and surrender to what is, that is what is, you know, and that is the universe. And that's like, it's so zen. It's like we try to overcomplicate it, but really it's just the journey of being here now. And when we're here now is when all our suffering just falls away like used garments, you know?
Yeah, because I've been thinking a lot about pain and pleasure and kind of these opposites that are really the same thing. Like emotional alchemy, kind of like how it's with the Sananga Eye Drops. I was like, that makes a lot of sense that when you surrender to it, it's not that you just don't feel it. It's like actually it kind of turns into pleasure. It kind of feeds into this hypothesis that I've been forming about sensation and how any sensation is just information. It's just like a 1 instead of a 0 of like activation, you know, and then how we choose to interpret that signal is so important. It's what tells us, like, you know, am I suffering or not, or am I like in bliss? And there are so many things like birth, you know, like orgasmic birth, like people who find that switch and are able to enter into this pleasure trance in this experience that we're so conditioned to think of as like the most painful thing a human body can endure, basically. And like cold, you know, I've been working a lot with cold, and like taking cold showers, and just, it's so amazing when you can just flip that switch and suddenly you're just like ecstatic when everything that you've been conditioned to think would like lead you to be screaming, but it's really so close, like just right across this thin line between like screaming in agony versus screaming in ecstasy. And actually so much harder to like neutralize a heightened state like that. Like if you're in a lot of pain, it might feel almost impossible to just like get to a state of neutrality, but to like switch it from one pole to the other, from like extreme pain to extreme pleasure, that to me feels way more accessible. So I've been working with that, like when I have a migraine or like really intense period cramps or something, just like, can I just translate this sensation into its opposite instead of trying to just not feel anything, you know? And it's working better than not trying to feel anything.
Yeah.
Do you think the cold showers are probably your go-to, like, easiest accessible way to flip that switch?
It's definitely good practice. Yeah. And I can't say I'm there all the time by any means. Like I definitely still experience a lot of resistance to it. But yeah, my sweetie and I have been doing the Wim Hof protocol for much of this year. And it's trippy shit. It's really, really pretty amazing.
There's so many tools in the universe to help us kind of, I mean, just to step out of our own conditioning and worldview, just for a little bit, you know, and it doesn't have to be this crazy like DMT just drop kick through your front door kind of perspective change. It could just be a very slight, subtle perspective change where, you know, that builds on another perspective change, and what you think as bland or sucks can turn into a koan. Like, you know, it's a portal for enlightenment. Anything, you know, a sound of a bell at a market can literally be that thing which connects you to the universe, and you become one. Psilocybin is very accessible to a lot of people, and I think will continue as growing techniques and actual just like abundance of, you know, this medicine gets available to people, and then the legislature change, it becomes legalized and decriminalized, and people can go into a clinic and have a session and things like that, and it's cheap. So I think it's huge. And to microdose, I think it's so huge for people because they don't want to have this like 7-hour plus journey and then the whole preparation of it and the whole integration of it, to just take a certain amount and just go through your day, but have that slight perspective change to where maybe they're dealing with an illness and something that sucks, like getting out of bed is like, oh my God, can turn into like, oh my God, thank you, I can get out of bed. Like, that's awesome. And that slight change can mean the world to someone. I remember a moment like that for me, microdosing was actually at a meditation retreat, and I was like having this super bad flare of Lyme, and it happened to flare on my right hip, and it was super, I mean, it was just like super inflamed. It was and I was limping while I was walking, and I was like younger 20s, and I was fit. And I was like, I shouldn't be limping around. This is really bad. And there's a staircase that we had to go walk up every day. And there's one day where I was walking up and there's people behind me, and I had to like, it was like 10 seconds per stair, you know, and it was like limp my way up and like grit my teeth. And there's people behind me being like, what the hell is this dude doing? And I was like super self-conscious about it, super embarrassed, like, oh my God, I'm, you know, keeping up this line of people, like I'm aggravating them. And then I had this switch of like, thank God I'm not in a wheelchair. Like, I can actually walk up these stairs, and it's like, cool, this is now turning into a walking meditation. And awesome, because I would usually walk up the stairs and not even think about it.
Yeah.
And now it's like, whoa, cool. Like, I get to walk upstairs, and I have that ability to even do it. And even more, it's not even that I have the ability to do it. I have the option now to enjoy it every single step, rather than just like run up it and not even think about it. I have the portal to actually like be present in every single step. And the opportunity to have this walking meditation and transport in the here and now, whereas before I would just be like, oh, stairs, like disconnect from reality for a little bit. And yeah, it's
so beautiful.
Curses can be blessings if you flip
They
the switch.
sure can. Yeah.
And psilocybin, I'm really excited about it, because it gives people opportunity to flip that switch, even just that tiny thing in their mind, to view something, instead of a curse, it's a blessing. And that can
or
be
just even a little thing that maybe you just had never noticed before. Like, I remember the first mushroom trip that I had, it just showed me, I was eating a banana and like looking at the banana peel and just seeing all the tiny little crystals of fructose, and I was just like, this has been here this whole time, and I've just never stopped to look. And then the next day I peeled a banana to see like if it was still there, and it sure was, and that's, I think, that like solidified my love of mushrooms, that moment when I was like, it wasn't imposing something that isn't here always, it's just peeling back the layer of conditioned boredom or whatever to reveal the true miraculous reality of this world, and like just reminding us, hey, everything is made of fucking magic. Like, don't forget.
I had that exact experience on mushrooms, actually. I was eating fruit and I was like, these bananas are so sparkly. And it was like, I couldn't ever unsee it, right? And I was eating a ton of fruit, and the kiwis were just the juiciest, furriest things. And I was like, I will always eat the kiwi skins from now on. Like, this is such a sensational paradox. It was amazing. And these are like the organs of God.
Yes. Wow. And like, how amazing that it just grows on trees. Like, just so there, what a beautiful partnership. Like, that the mushrooms are like, hey, check out my girls just hanging in the trees there, just springing out of the ground for free, like me, just like all the best shit just grows for free from planet Earth if we don't fuck it up.
So bringing it back to embodying plants or mushrooms and having a microphone to allow them to, share their wisdom and their message. If mushrooms had the microphone and were using you as their vessel to channel a certain message and could say one thing to the whole human race, what would they say?
Well, I think the big teaching that's been coming through for me in this place applies to all of us on planet Earth, which is like, feel your grief. Like, stop and listen and make some space to feel your grief for what's happening and what has been done to the earth. And I think we have understandable resistance to doing that because it's definitely not comfortable. But as long as we are afraid of it and building these walls to prevent ourselves from feeling it, we're not going to soften and take the appropriate actions to address the causes of the grief. We're just going to be repressing and avoiding. So I think feeling it is the first step towards the healing that needs to happen, because the thing about grief is you wouldn't be grieving it if you didn't love the thing that you're grieving. So the flip side of grief is love. So we clearly love this planet and each other and all life on Earth, or we wouldn't be feeling as much grief as we are repressing, if that makes sense. So feel your grief.
Thank you, Johanna.
Thank you both so much. Thank you for holding this amazing space that you do and creating this podcast and just being beautiful humans doing the good work.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks for using your voice and your big loud microphone and just sharing these personal stories. It's important that we do that and recognize that we're not alone. So
Thank you.
Where can people continue to listen to you? I know you were featured in a Midnight Gospel episode, and you're your own artist. You're obviously taking a break from touring right now, but I'm sure people can listen to you online. Where can people tune in?
Yeah, my website is just johannawarren.com, and I'm on Spotify and iTunes and all the things. So yeah, come find me.
and there'll be links to all of that in the show notes for interested parties.
And thanks everyone for tuning in, Sherman in. We wouldn't be able to do it without you. I mean, this is for you. It's for the people, for the mushrooms, and to bridge the gap for everyone to continue having these conversations, to continue to tune into grief and to find the wisdom in every single little aspect of life. Mushrooms just happen to be an incredible portal for us, and we love the shit out of mushrooms and fungi because they're just so magical and mystical, and we love sharing that for people to find that spark. This is our spark, and you know, sharing it with other people is so interesting, especially because it's so vilified in a lot of societies around the world. Most people just don't talk about mushrooms. So to talk about it is such a radical notion, and it's so awesome to do because mushrooms and fungi are just so incredible. So we love you. Write a review, tell your friends, share on your social, whatever. And as always, much love, and may the spores be with you.
So good.
It's a classic exit.
So good.